Hey guys, in this episode of On Two Wheels, super bikes. Our annual Class of test is something we look forward to every year because it means bringing together the most powerful and technologically advanced motorcycles available to the public. This year that includes the Aprilia RS-V4 RF, BMW's S1000RR, the Ducati 1299 Panigale S, Kawasaki ZX-10R, and Yamaha's new YZF R1M.
That's almost 900 horsepower and NASA amounts of technology. And because these bikes are so sophisticated, we always break this test down into two categories. So, in this episode, using science as well as this easel, we will determine which bikes are best on the street and which bikes are best on the track. First up,
the street.
I've always really liked the RS-V4 for two reasons. I love how compact it is and the way it fits me, and I absolutely love that V4 engine. This new bike, Aprilia went over it top to bottom and they found a ton of horsepower. And they also shortened the internal gear ratios so it accelerates a lot faster. I mean, this thing is a freaking rocket. Given the fact that it's cranked out 180 horsepower, it's surprisingly easy to ride. I mean, throttle response is fantastic. The suspension isn't electronic, but it's still premium Olin stuff and really well calibrated. And I mean, who can argue with the sound of that V4 engine? This bike makes the second most horsepower here. It's comfortable, it sounds absolutely amazing. It steers where you want it to, the suspension works great, the brakes work great. It just behaves so well, which is really amazing given the fact that it makes as much power as it does and is just such a potent machine.
Yamaha's R1M. This baby is a very impressive bike, but it's not impressive for the reason that you think it is. You think it's impressive because it has electronic suspension and it has all the gizmos and whiz-bangs and doodads. But what's the most impressive is that Yamaha said they focused on the track, first and foremost. We're making this a track-oriented bike that you can also take on the street. So what's incredible is how good it is on the street. The frame spars get hot, but your legs don't touch them, like on the BMW S1000RR. It's buttery smooth, much smoother than the BMW, smoother than the Ducati. Then again, an out-of-balance washing machine is smoother than the Ducati, so that's not saying a lot. Coming to a stop on this bike and turning it around will show the only two chinks in the R1's armor. One, it doesn't have the auto blip downshift. That's all the rage these days that the Ducati and BMW have, that are pretty brilliant if we're honest, especially on the racetrack. It's fun on the street. The other thing is that this bike is geared for about 350 miles an hour as far as I can tell. Other than that, this has caught up to, if not surpassed, the best handling superbike ever as far as I'm concerned, which is Aprilia's RS-V4, which is still incredible, but this, I don't think anything handles as well as this does. It's absolutely just telepathic. You look where you want to go, and you're there. Beautiful Yamaha, beautiful.
What the hell is it doing? Just calm down, jeez. Historically, the Panigale has not been the most comfortable street bike. Ducati made this one a little better with a softer seat and some more heat shielding over that giant exhaust. It does have pretty good legroom. But other than that, this thing is brutal. It is not comfortable. It is not even close to comfortable. When you're sitting in traffic, there's so much heat coming off that rear header that it literally feels like my boys are on a barbecue. If anyone out there is thinking about getting a vasectomy, just spend a couple hours on a Panigale on a hot day and you'll be fixed for life. The bike does have the auto up and down shift, the quick shifter up and down, which is pretty bitchin', but doesn't work nearly as well as BMW's setup. And this engine, while it's an impressive feat of engineering making a crap ton of power, it's just so rowdy and so difficult to manage. Aggressive throttle response, grabby clutch. I mean, Ducati's got cachet, it is drop dead gorgeous, but as a street bike, there are a lot of better machines out there.
Well, no engine heat here on the S1000RR. The frame spars do get a little hot, and depending on what RPM you're at, the bars get a little bit buzzy. But other than that, it's largely perfect. Not a lot to dislike about this bike. I mean, the mirrors are perfect, the seat's comfortable, the riding position's good, it's got cruise control, it's got heated grips, it's got 185 horsepower, and the brakes, good golly, the brakes are good. Some people say that they're a little grabby. I say no such thing. If you think it's ugly, don't buy it. If you think it doesn't sound cool enough, don't buy it. But man, on science alone, this thing is a fucking masterpiece, man. It's incredible.
The ZX-10, the Ninja, the quintessential sport bike. Unlike the rest of the bikes in this comparison, the ZX-10R was not designed first and foremost to dominate on the racetrack. Pretty interesting that it's done so well in World Superbike, but the fact is Kawasaki put a ton of time into making this a functional street bike. And it is. It's plenty comfortable, it's very smooth, strong brakes, strong motor. It does everything you want a superbike to do. Unless, of course, you want your superbike to have wheelie control, launch control, and electric suspension. But if you're not into that sort of thing, ZX-10 is still a kick-ass motorcycle. It's crazy to think that just a few years ago, this is the cream of the crop. This was the top of the hill for bikes from Japan. But now, with the new R1, with the new S1000RR, and the Panigale, and the RSV4, the fact is, the ZX-10 is just outclassed. That does not mean it's not an absolutely wonderful motorcycle. And if you buy one, you will definitely be happy. But if you're looking for cutting edge, it is well beyond where the Kawasaki is.
Not surprisingly, we were having a blast riding all of these bikes. Enough so that we lost track of daylight and may have ignored the low fuel light a little too long. But nothing makes you appreciate just how light superbikes have gotten, like having to push one to the gas station. So, no surprise that BMW has the best street bike. Were you surprised?
Not in the slightest.
Nobody was surprised. What was a surprise, however, is that Aprilia's RSV4 was pretty good on the street.
Yeah.
They added a bunch of power, it's got slightly shorter gearing, it looks gorgeous, it sounds better than anything
Yes.
I've ever heard.
It does.
It's really a great motorcycle. The R1 gets the nod because the ride modes are a little bit more diverse, a little bit more tunable, and the suspension offers a lot more flexibility on the street. All things considered, it's also gorgeous, also sounds great, and is really comfortable. It's a great bike.
Yep. So that rounds out the top three. In fourth position is Kawasaki's ZX-10R, which is still a very relevant motorcycle. It's comfortable, it's got great wind protection, and it's the most affordable bike here.
Which brings us to the most expensive bike in the test that finished last in the street portion.
Yes, Ducati's 1299 Panigale blasts your thighs with engine heat, and it's got super abrupt throttle response, a super grabby clutch. I mean, the thing's as painful to ride as it is pleasing to look at.
Indeed. But the Ducati faithful would probably say that this is a performance machine. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be dominant on a racetrack.
All right, well, I think the only fair thing to do is set these things free on a track.
Phew, that's a good idea. Let's cross our fingers then that this says track on it.
Yes!
My favorite part.
And wouldn't you know it, the Ducati was in its element at the track. The engine still hits hard and slams into the rev limiter too quickly, but once you calibrate to its character, it'll fire you off corners like a steam catapult. And the quick shifter is butter at high RPM, way smoother than it was on the street. The Duck's brakes are beastly, and none of the bikes were as composed while trail braking towards an apex. And those wide bars that were so awkward on the street, they offer a lot of leverage at the track. The Ducati transitioned the fastest and had the quickest, lightest handling by a fair margin.
On the other hand, the BMW felt like it gained weight at the track. Crank up the speed and the Beamer steering gets really heavy, making fast transitions a lot of work. Part of the problem is the riding position, which is just too relaxed for aggressive track work. Power, however, is not a problem. There really aren't any words to describe how insane the BMW's engine feels once that tack needle swings past 12,000 RPM. It feels like it shouldn't even be legal. Thankfully, the brakes are just as vicious. The hardware is similar, we know, but the BMW's Brembos feel twice as powerful as the other bikes.
Yamaha's R1M sits low on the list in terms of horsepower, but you'd never know it from looking at the lap times. Handling is out of this world, and the chassis feels rock solid in every part of the turn. A compact riding position is a big bonus on the track. The R1 is easy to move around on, yet you always feel connected to the bike. Electronics are the Yamaha's claim to fame, and it's an inspiring package. Everything, the suspension, traction control, slide control, and ABS, are perfectly tuned to help you turn faster laps.
This top-of-the-line RF version adds about $6,000 to the price of a base model RSV4 and gets you forged wheels, Öhlins suspension, and racy graphics. It is absolutely sublime on a closed circuit. A slightly more aggressive stance than the R1 puts the Aprilia in a perfect position to fly around a racetrack. The bike feels compact, and any inputs get ultra-quick responses. The motor, quick shifter, and brakes are all stunning. Think you'll miss the electronic suspension here? You won't. Despite having less technology than some of the competition, the Aprilia almost topped the charts at the track. Not all that surprising when you think about it. 180 horsepower and near perfect handling will do that.
In 2012, the ZX-10 beat out all the other bikes from Japan in our all-Japanese shootout. But 3 years on, the Ninja has remained the same, while the rest of the class has progressed, dramatically. And that fact was plainly evident at the track. The Ninja makes good power, but not as much as the other bikes here. It handles well, but not as well as the competition. And it has some useful electronic features, but they're not as good as what the other bikes have. The traction control in particular proved less refined and less effective. Combine that with the rear end that lacked mechanical grip, despite lots of suspension tuning, and we just didn't have the confidence to get on the gas hard. We tried to push the Kawasaki as hard as the other bikes, but it kept pushing back. And when a bike pushes back, you should listen. Because, as it turns out,
There's this little tidbit from my tip over on the ZX-10.
Yeah, tip over is a bit of an understatement. What you did was you high-sided the thing at about 60 or 70 miles an hour and turned it into scrap metal.
Yeah, I kind of did. Yeah, 70,000 miles an hour is more like what it felt like. But it did serve as a very real reminder, which I obviously needed, that it doesn't really matter how technologically advanced these bikes get. They're still pretty easy to crash if you think you're better than you are.
Absolutely, and you know what? That's the reason we come to the racetrack, because when you're pushing the envelope, sometimes this stuff happens. But the main reason we came out to Buttonwillow Raceway was to figure out what is the best superbike of 2015.
Indeed. And in this case, it was pretty clear, really. Ari did his best lap on it, and I did my best lap on it. It's Yamaha's new YZF R1M. This is how it shook out. In the end, R1M at the top of the charts, and for all the same reasons, really, whether it was Ari or myself. The front end works the best, it comes out of corners the best, all the electronics work terrifically well together. It's everything you want a track bike to be.
Yeah, and look at that lap time, man. 102.4, that is smoking fast.
Agreed.
But RSV4 right on its tail, 0.2 of a second off. And I mean, this top spread is ridiculous. That's 3/4 of a second separating the top 4 motorcycles. So that is a real close gap.
Yeah, real tight at the top. But needless to say, R1M, best track bike. BMW S1000, as we discussed, best street bike. Which brings us to our final point, which is that this test is not always about which bike is best in a certain scenario. It's about which bike speaks to you, which bike you want to be seen riding and you want to feel underneath you. So, Ari Henning, if it's your money, which one do you have?
You know, that's actually a really easy question to answer. I would get the RSV4 because that V4 motor absolutely just speaks to me. I love the way it makes power, I love the way it sounds. And you know what? It was a really good street bike and it was blistering fast on the racetrack.
Yeah, I support your decision 100%, my friend. That is a terrific motorcycle.
Well, what about you, Zach? What would you get?
Well, I hate to be cliche, but I gotta get the S1000. For me, on the track, it was a lot of fun. It worked really well, stupid fast. Yeah. And on the street, I mean, it's just the most horsepower, cruise control, heated grips, comfortable. I don't really know what else to say.
Yeah, man, not a bad decision.
So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this test as much as we did. And I'm sure everyone on the internet will agree with all of the conclusions that we came to, yeah?
Oh yeah, nothing but positive comments and thumbs up.
See you next time, guys.
This is the anatomy of Zach's high side on the ZX-10 during our 2015 class of testing. This is turn 1, it's max lean angle, you're in second gear, you're hard on the gas. You can see this dark stripe here that's getting wider and darker, and at the end it kind of hooks over. That's where you high-sided. So the bike high-sided and flipped. We've got this green mark from where the tank touched down, and that's probably bar end or lever. And the bike jumped up in the air, rotated. We got some more hard parts that went down. You've got this black smear here with a gash, which is the tire and the rim impacting the ground. And then another 20 feet on, we've got a much bigger one.
We've got a left and a right, that's probably the rear. It's all smeared with rubber and a big gouge, the same on the left side, and then there's some middle parts where probably the engine and rear set touched. And then another 20 feet down after the bike flew through the air, we've got some more hard parts touching down, some more rubber smears, and then it looks like the bike just slid on its side, went another 30 feet, and came to a stop here. And Zach was off in the dirt there, so I mean, we've just covered probably 120, 130 feet start to finish.